Hi, this is Corey Franklin with Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to talk about Ravi Shankar, who died recently at the age of 92. And Ravi Shankar was the classical Indian sitar player who changed our history, our society, and our culture. Here's The Guardian on Ravi Shankar.
Ravi Shankar, the great Indian sitar player, died on the west coast of America overnight at the age of 92. Shankar's a hugely important and influential figure, not only the person who brought Indian music into contact with the West more than anyone else, I think, but also different forms of Western music. So both classical, he worked with people like Yehudi, Menuhin, and then also most famously with the Beatles as well, after meeting them in the late 60s and trying to teach George Harrison how to play the sitar. An interview with Ravi from 1967 that appeared in an American magazine on the occasion of his playing the Monterey Pop Festival, which was the precursor to Woodstock. Really important moment in the history of Western rock music, also Ravi Shankar's career. It was a festival bill that included The Who and Jimi Hendrix, and there was Ravi Shankar as well, playing in front of an audience of baffled, but I think enraptured hippies. And what's so nice about the pieces, you have Ravi Shankar talking about the audience on the west coast of the States, saying that he didn't really think his music was for alcoholics or drug addicts, and that people ought to be able to appreciate the music on its own terms. And that clearly was something that resonated, and you can, I guess, make an argument for a whole birth of spiritualism on the west coast of the States going hand in hand with that kind of thing.
Well, we can talk about Ravi Shankar as a musician, as a cultural influence, or as a historical figure. We'll start out as a musician. Like many of the people we talk about, he was not a prodigy. He actually didn't start playing the sitar in India until he was in his teens. He was a musical genius. He traveled between the East and West, and he became quite well known in his 30s for his sitar playing. And he was introduced and influenced some of the great musicians of the 20th century. And this is independent of the Beatles and rock and roll. He did a Grammy Award-winning album with one of the world's greatest violinists, Yehudi Menuhin. He also collaborated several times with the world's greatest flautist, J.P. Rampal. And the legendary jazz saxophonist John Coltrane asked to study with him and did a tribute to him in a song called India. So Ravi Shankar certainly had a prestigious pedigree even before he was introduced to rock and roll. And contrary to all the reports and obituaries, it was not George Harrison and the Beatles who discovered Ravi Shankar in the 1960s for the rock and roll world. He was one of the great underrated geniuses of rock and roll music, and he never seems to get enough credit for all the groundbreaking work he did, but it was Roger McGuinn of the Byrds. Listen to his account and the amazing way he used his 12-string to sound like a sitar.
I first heard Ravi Shankar back in 1964 when Jim Dixon played some of the stuff that they'd been recording over at World Pacific, where he worked. And Ravi was one of their artists, and we loved it. I'd never heard anything like Indian music before. And Crosby and I got into it on the 12 strings. We started playing... trying to emulate the sound of the sitar on the 12 string.
The Byrds got started when Roger McGuinn and David Crosby saw A Hard Day's Night. When they became big a year later in 1965, the Beatles really admired them. They came out to visit them in Los Angeles at Zsa Zsa Gabor's house. It may be where John Lennon got the granny glasses idea. They dropped LSD with them. George Harrison had never heard Indian music, so Roger McGuinn, reportedly under the influence of LSD, played them what was to be the Byrds' next single. Once again, McGuinn was trying to imitate the sitar with a 12-string, and this is what actually turned George Harrison on to Indian music. A brief time after that, you heard the first sitar on a rock and roll record as George Harrison tried to play it like a guitar in Norwegian Wood.
I once had a girl, or should I say, she once had me. She showed me her room, isn't it good, Norwegian Wood.
At this point, George Harrison was only dabbling with the sitar, but he was intent on learning the instrument better and also getting more acquainted with the Indian lifestyle, and he arranged a meeting with Ravi Shankar, which became one of the seminal meetings in rock and roll history.
I met them for the first time, the Beatles. And believe me, I had no idea who they were real. I just vaguely had heard that they are very popular. It was George who really attracted me in the sense that he was so interested in Indian music, philosophy. He had come to a few of my concerts, heard me in the Royal Festival Hall and different places, and he has all my records, and he has been so much interested in sitar. I told him very frankly, that it's not like guitar, that you have a lot of talent, you just learn few chords, and if you have enough talent, you can be on your own, write your songs, which is fantastic. But like classical guitar, or anything like violin or cello, you have to give many years and many hours to work hard on it. He did develop a lot musically by listening all the time to records, by thinking about it, and as much as I could give him through talking to him about music. And he has become one of the dearest person in my life. I really love him like my son. And he considers me as his father. But we are at the same time great friends. A lot of fun.
The first person who ever impressed me in my life was Ravi Shankar, and he was the only person who didn't try to impress me.
Now,
Remember, that's the guy who'd been playing with John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
try to count 5, 5, and 6.
My blessing was to be able to have Ravi as my patch cord.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1.
Contrast George Harrison's sitar playing in Norwegian Wood with Within You, Without You, a little more than a year later on Sgt. Pepper.
When we find to try our best to hold it with our love, we can save the world if they only
Well, when you're teaching the Beatles, you become a cultural influence, and Ravi Shankar became a huge cultural influence. And the critical point in that cultural influence came with his appearance at the Monterey Pop Festival. We talked about the Monterey Pop Festival. You can go back to our program on Scott McKenzie. It was in June of 1967, and Ravi Shankar asked for an entire afternoon by himself, and he was granted it, and he got 4 hours. It's well documented in D.A. Pennebaker's film about the Monterey Pop Festival, and Eric Burden mentions it in his song about the Monterey Pop Festival.
The bird and the airplane did fly. Oh, Ravi Shankar's music made me cry. Down in Monterey,
Yeah, it made a lot of people cry. This was a true cultural breakthrough. Kids started wearing Indian stuff, going for the Indian lifestyle. You can see in the film when Ravi Shankar is playing Mickey Dolenz is with a bunch of people and he's in Indian garb. And this made Ravi Shankar an international rock star. I mean, he was almost as big as the Beatles, and he was uncomfortable with it. He said later it was a good thing it happened to him when he was in his 40s, or else he might have succumbed to the lifestyle. One sentiment he commonly expressed at the time was that he was ambivalent about his effect. I mean, you had kids going to Bombay and begging in the streets and all sorts of drugs and all sorts of stuff like that. Many of them were taken in by Indian hustlers. You know, there are hustlers in India too. And he was quite bothered by that aspect of it.
Everything was happening together. And they were giving all these mantras to the young people. Take hashish, take LSD, take this. This is how you can meet God. In India, everyone does it. And that's not true at that time. They created Haight Ashbury and the whole work. Kama Sutra, Tantra, Tibetan hole in the head, Siddhartha. These were only the few things they read, all the young people. And they were thinking they know everything. Playing guitar for hours, stoned. What are you doing? I'm discovering new music. Writing stupid lines, my own thing. Painting just like that. But on the other hand, I like them because at that period, that innocence was there.
Now once more, Vande Gurudeva, Jaya Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Shri Gurudeva, Jaya Jaya Gurudeva. It is in praise of the Guru.
He played at Woodstock in 1969 and he was unimpressed with the theatrics and the self-aggrandizement of some of the artists. But then in 1971 was perhaps his greatest historical influence, and it's something that wasn't mentioned enough in his obituaries. After World War II, the Indian subcontinent was divided into Pakistan, primarily Muslim, and India, primarily Hindu, and there was an East Pakistan and a West Pakistan. In 1970, East Pakistan was devastated by a massive cyclone which killed 500,000 people. The local government responded poorly, and West Pakistan went in Operation Searchlight and invaded the country. This caused the Bengalis of East Pakistan to separate from Pakistan and declare their own country, Bangladesh. But at the time, Bangladesh was racked with poverty, disease, and famine after the cyclone, and they needed a relief effort. And Ravi Shankar appealed to George Harrison. The Beatles had just broken up, and George Harrison thought it was a tremendous idea, and they organized the relief concert for Bangladesh at Madison Square Garden in 1971, and it remains today the most successful and most impressive rock concert for charity ever achieved. Today there are rock concerts for charity all the time. This was the first and remains the best. While John is dabbling in heroin and Paul is writing silly little love songs with wings, George Harrison has created a true massive relief effort through rock and roll, with Ravi Shankar to thank for it.
So let me introduce on sitar Ravi Shankar. Really, it was Ravi Shankar's idea. He wanted to do something like this, and he was talking to me and telling me about his concern with the thing and asking me if I had any suggestions. Then, after half an hour, he talked me into being on the show.
War was going on between Pakistan and Eastern Pakistan, it was then known, which was part of original whole of Bengal. That's where I belong to. And all my distant relatives, along with many other refugees, they were coming by thousands to Calcutta, and all the women and children suffering, and all that made me feel very concerned. And George immediately felt that he would help.
I think the awareness is maybe even more important than the money, because again, even if we make $5 million, it's still small compared to the size of the problem. So it's more important to really bring the awareness around to the mass of people.
it happened so quickly. Within few weeks, he phoned all his friends, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, and Billy Preston, and many others, and fixed Madison Square Garden. Overnight, everybody knew the name of Bangladesh all over the world.
And Ravi Shankar was serious when he did that. Just to let the audience know how serious he was warming up and they started applauding, and he made a deliberately snide put-down to let them know this was a deadly serious affair.
Thank you. If you appreciate the tuning so much, I hope you'll enjoy the playing more.
The concert for Bangladesh continues to influence world foreign policy, and I think that will be Ravi Shankar's greatest legacy. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of his other legacies. Ravi Shankar had 3 children, a son who died several years ago. One of his daughters is one of the top sitar players in the world, and his other daughter is Norah Jones, the great pop star. Here's a little bit of Norah Jones singing a great Hank Williams classic. I can pretty much guarantee you're not going to get a confluence of Ravi Shankar and Hank Williams on any other program.
Yeah, you're afraid each thing I do is just some evil scheme. A memory from your lonesome past keeps us so far apart. Why can't I free your doubtful mind and melt your cold, cold heart?
They had a little bit of a fractious relationship, but I think they patched it up before he died. I heard one program that referred to Ravi Shankar as the guru of raga rock, and I think that really does a disservice to what a serious, committed individual he was and what a great musician he was. Here he talks a little bit about his philosophy.
What I have been able to do was only popularize and make our music understood and appreciated in a proper manner. That has been my mission, and I feel very happy that it's almost I have completed that. My music is something which has become part of my life, my body, my whole being. Something very serious, the sanctity of it, the spiritual side, all the depth which is so much connected with our old tradition, culture, religion, everything.
At one point in India, he even caught some grief that they felt he'd sold out to the West, but I don't think that's true. And I read on one Indian blog something that was really well stated. One man wrote, "For people like me, his greatest achievement is straightforward. In the 60s and 70s, when the West looked down on Indians and Indian culture, he single-handedly turned the tide and made us proud of ourselves and our traditions. Until the end, he remained himself, slightly detached from the fame and always willing to laugh at it. But he never, ever compromised on the music of his forefathers, and he took Indian music to new global heights." I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. The closing tribute to Ravi Shankar will be a George Harrison song from the live concert for Bangladesh. It's not the most popular song, but it is my favorite. I think it's the best. Eric Clapton is playing behind him as backup guitar. Ringo is one of the people on drums. So for Ravi Shankar, by chanting the name of the Lord, you will be free. This is George Harrison with "Awaiting on You All."
You don't need no passport, and you don't need no visa. You don't need to designate or to have a great. You open up your heart.